right, and now it's time to find out what the big stories are making headlines across Nigeria on the newspapers this morning. We're going to kick off on the Nation newspapers and share with you what we can find. Big one there says federal government proposes 26 trillion naira appropriation for next year. Of course, currently Nigeria's highest budget. There are different angles to pick out from there, and of course, some of them will be what figures we currently are with debt servicing. What our budget deficit currently is. 2023, I think it was 11 trillion budget deficit. And of course, how does Nigeria plan to finance this with the little figures here and there? Oil price, of course, they've put a benchmark at $73. The exchange rate at 700 naira. Are these things really feasible? These are some of the things that we will be looking at. And of course, also, how is Nigeria planning to save more money? How is Nigeria also planning to, raise more income, every year for itself so it can, to some extent, start to fund its own budget? How much more debt will we be into in the next 4 years if we continue to borrow to fund our budget? These are the major questions that I think we would be trying to answer sometime today and, of course, for the rest of the week. Also on the Nation this morning, Akpabio sacked Elisha Abo. Clash over appeal court verdict. Okay, Akpabio sacked Abo, clash over appeal court verdict. Food, fuel prices push inflation to 26.72%. IMF says the phenomenon is global. Interesting. Umahi, Ogunclair to fix and toll Abeokuta Ota Road. Kogi West elders endorse ADC candidate Abejide. We can also find here 2 Oshun pensioners slumped during verification in Oshogbo. Ayedatiwa loses bid to stall impeachment. Court fixes October 30 for suit. I am in charge. Akeredolu tells protesting PDP chieftains. Yes, there was, a little protest yesterday, mostly on social media, asking that Governor Rotimi Akeredolu show himself because he has apparently been missing even ever since he returned back to Nigeria from his medical treatment, where he was away for many, many weeks. He's been back in the country, but of course doesn't seem to be in charge of governance in Ondo State. And so there has been a call that he either steps down or, gets back fully into running the state. Lawmakers to get supplementary budget. FEC endorses $1.5 billion World Bank loan, $80 million for Ekiti Knowledge Zone. One of the things that was also spoken about yesterday. And also, N-Power beneficiaries to get pay backlog from next month. These are the big stories on the Nation newspapers this morning. And once again, the one that catches attention will still be the federal government proposing 26 trillion naira appropriation for next year. How is the Nigerian government hoping to be able to afford, 26 trillion naira budget? How much more would we likely borrow? There's already approval for $1.5 billion loan. Would we require more over time? How also can we maybe save money? And of course, look at what Nigeria's current debt profile is, about 87 trillion naira. It's staggering, to say the least. Let's move away from the Nation and see what we can find on the Daily Trust newspapers.
On the Daily Trust newspapers, food access drops as inflation hits 18-year high. Nigerians lament hunger, poverty. Farmers blame corruption and poor policy implementation. Prices drop in Taraba, but no money to buy. That's another perspective. Whilst the price of the food is, whilst we're complaining about inflation, even if the prices come down, some do not even have the money to buy. We're intensifying all-year food production, according to the federal government. 17 abducted Kaduna villages still in captivity 17 days after. That's really wild. FEC okays $1.5 billion World Bank loan, $80 million Ekiti Knowledge Zone project. Conjunctivitis outbreak hits 15 local government areas in Adamawa. Experts react as federal government proposes 26 trillion naira for 2024 budget. Benchmark crude price at $73.96 per barrel and dollar at 700 naira. Israel-Hamas war. Saudi Arabia summons Nigeria, other OIC countries to emergency meeting. Appeal court sack, above fingers Akpabio. Senate President denies involvement. Cattle market. Northern traders cry out over Abia eviction threat. These are the stories we have on the Daily Trust. Let's move away to the Daily Independent.
Oh,
newspaper.
just before the Daily Independent, a few things on the Daily Trust, or one or two things that I could quickly just speak on.
Okay.
Once again, it's hard to imagine how the courts have decided that a person didn't win the elections, and that person then says that it is likely the Senate president that is fighting him and trying to bring him down. You would normally not be able to link these two items together, but remember, you're in Nigeria, and so these things can be connected somehow, some way, according to what the stories would say. But 17 abducted Kaduna villagers still in captivity 17 days later. And why I'm bringing that up is because I want everyone to remember that all is not well with regard to security in Nigeria. We seem to have less of these things make the headlines and make national conversations because we either have gotten used to it, or it's maybe not just as prevalent as it used to be. But it doesn't mean that these things should still not be mentioned. There are still kidnappings going on in parts of the country. Nigerian security agencies still have a ton of work that needs to be done to ensure that Nigeria is, to some extent, a safe place to live and to do business and to exist. We cannot be talking about tourism if we're still reporting kidnappings, like this. We can't be talking about businesses and different regions of the country thriving if we're still having these type of security agencies. We'll be expanding on the conversations concerning Nigeria's budget this morning. So stay with us. We, of course, will bring that up in a bit. Let's move away from the Daily Trust and see what we can find on the Daily Independent newspapers this morning. It says right there, CBN lifting FX ban on agri items puts investment in sector at risk. Inflation rises to 26.72% as food fuel prices soar. Wike Wabara clash over call for Anyanwu to resign as PDP scribe. And also Senate asks BPE to stop planned sale of NCC's 5 coal blocks. Naira redesign. CBN collected 3.2 trillion, printed only 402 billion naira, says Falana. And that is in a sane country, in a place where audited and questions are asked by the people who should ask these questions, by the National Assembly, by the executive, in a country where those questions are raised and dealt with. Everybody who was responsible for the failed Naira rebranding rebranding project should be questioned severely and maybe even jailed. It depends on what the allegations would be.
Especially because of the untold hardship that Naira policy cost Nigerians. Yes. People lost their lives because of the Naira policy.
Very true.
And they then even extended it till this year, December. It doesn't look like anything like anything.
The mismanagement of that project should not just be swept under the rug.
Go unpunished.
It should not go unpunished. And we cannot just act like it didn't happen or it doesn't matter. It does matter because these things affected lives for months in Nigeria. So, but of course, it's the country where we're going to blame one person and then when it stops making headlines, everyone just moves on. But these things are very important. So yes, CBN collected 3.2 trillion naira, printed only 402 billion naira, says Fen Falana. Fake news, major cause of election violence, says INEC. Well, maybe not just fake news, maybe also failure of security agencies to arrest and prosecute those who threaten voters days before the elections. How about that? How about the failure of government or the security agencies to arrest and apprehend those who boldly, live on camera, threaten people to not come out to vote? That I think is more of a cause of election violence than just fake news. INEC. Tinubu swears in Lawal, Jamila Olawande as ministers, and also stop undermining democracy with your utterances, PDP tells Ganduje. These are the big stories on the Daily Independent. Oh, okay. Yes, once again, resume duties or resign. PDP tells Governor Akeredolu, governor may leave Nigeria to continue treatment abroad. Very interesting. Appeal court sacks APC's Abo, declares PDP's Yohana senator. Akpabio behind my sack. Ojikalu is next, says Elisha Abo.
And then what happens when Ojikalu isn't sacked?
Exactly. Well, we'll see.
All right.
We'll see.
Let's move to our final paper and punch you with some headlines from the Punch. On the Punch newspaper, 2024, federal government plans 26 trillion naira budget Debt servicing to gulp 8.25 trillion naira. Personnel debt services cost to gulp 62% of 26 trillion naira. Government plans 700 naira to the dollar. Remember the time of Osarogie where we would never have dared to imagine that the dollar would rise up to 700 naira. Now, government is planning with 700 naira to the dollar. It's almost like we're praying that this dollar should move down from 1,000 and at least get back to 700. And at a point, we thought if 700 happens, we are finished. It's all over.
But as always, there's always a little space to adjust, and that's one of the things that makes you a Nigerian. There's space to adjust. You would always be able to, find more money to stay alive. If you used to buy petrol 20,000 naira a month before, now you're buying 60 to 80,000 naira, you would be able to adjust. Cost of living, of course, has increased. Inflation is at 26.7%. Nigerians will always adjust.
Federal government okays 2024 to 2026 MTEF, Tinubu to present and sign budget before December 31st. 20 Osun pensioners suffer exhaustion amid rowdy verification. This is one of the stories that breaks my heart the most in Nigeria. Looking at the picture of that old man who has worked for his money for years, and now it's time to collect the dividend of his lifelong service. And yet, you see the man passed out on a chair, on a bed. It's very embarrassing to see the way that our senior citizens are being treated in Nigeria.
Yeah, and to put it in proper context, this person worked for 30, 35 years of his life, gave service to the country. There are people who are governors for 4 years. And
then they are set for life.
For a lifetime.
So it's just really sad and heartbreaking. There are certain banks in Nigeria that are known to have a lot of pensioners. You see them in queues, crying and begging. It's almost like they don't owe us anything, right? We owe them. So we should do better with our pensioners. Palliatives, Nigerians condemn poor ration, lambasts governors. Third Mainland Bridge now a death trap, motorists lament, and we can agree to that, we can attest to that. The potholes are terrible, very massive potholes on Third Mainland Bridge. And I don't know what is being done about that with the festive season approaching. Akpabio behind my removal from Senate. Abo alleges Putin demands ceasefire, and that's in reference to Israel-Hamas. Cardinal offers self for hostages. Will they accept? Subsidy removal, Naira fall push food inflation to 30.64%. And final story, federal government gets over $1.5 billion fresh World Bank AFDB loans by December. And this is according to Edu on page 19. And that's all that we can take this morning.